Hello everyone. Today I'm going to briefly take you through how you can use Adobe Illustrator to build your own custom floor plan for Remo quickly and easily. Creating custom floor plans seems very scary and intimidating. I get it. But really, it's just about creating different shapes, combining them together in what we call layers, and then naming those layers a specific way. So in this tutorial, I'm going to take you through each of these elements and how you can create them using Adobe Illustrator. You can download a free 7-day trial through their website, but after that, it will be a monthly or annual subscription fee. Before we begin, if this is your first time designing a custom floor plan, I recommend you download our standard floor plan from our design guidelines on our Help Center. This way you can use the standard floor plan as a template and play around with it first. Because honestly, the best way to learn to create a floor plan is to dissect the one that we have so you can get a better understanding about how it was created and how you can go about creating your very own. That being said, I'm going to take you through some of the key aspects to make this testing and experimentational process for you a little bit easier. So this is Adobe Illustrator. If you want to move around, you can use your mouse pad to scroll left, right, up, and down. You can also use the pinch zoom in and pinch zoom out, just like you would on Google Maps. On the left side over here is where you can add all of your shapes and vectors. So you've got the pen tool, the shape tool, the text elements, and a selection tool over here. And on the right side, you can control the properties of your elements, such as the size, the colors, the fonts, and more. Over here, you can also access the layers in your design file. Now, layers are really important when designing your custom floor plan, because essentially each element, like the table, the seats, the billboards, they'll have their very own layer. And the way you name that layer is how the Remo system will recognize these elements for what they are. So to create a layer in Adobe Illustrator, you just need to select all the elements that you want in a layer together, and then click this menu button in the upper right corner of the screen and select Collect in New Layer. Then to rename that layer, you can just double click on the layer and rename it as so. Once you create a layer, you'll notice this little arrow button over here. This will expand or collapse the layer. You can think of a layer kind of like a folder on your computer or on your desk. Inside that folder, you're going to have other documents or papers. So just like that, inside a layer, you've got different elements. So to see what elements are inside your layer, you can click this arrow. To reorder layers, you can click the layer and drag it to whatever order you prefer on this right side panel. To remove elements from a layer, just click the element and drag it outside the layer folder. Similarly, to add elements to a layer, again, click on the element and drag it into the layer. Alright, now I'm going to take you through constructing each of the elements one by one. So to begin with, you've got the floor plan background. This, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the background of your entire floor plan. In our standard layout, it's the green part with the trees and bushes. There's nothing functional about this area, it's just there to make your floor plan look nice and give your guests some context. So you can add a rectangle and fill it with whatever color you want, like your brand's colors, for example, or you could even add an image if you'd prefer, by copying and pasting it just like you would do on a Word document. So I'm going to use an image for my floor plan background. So I've got an image I found from Unsplash that I like for the background. And now I'm going to drag the image into my design file as so. Now it's really big, so I need to resize it to make it the correct size. And now one thing you need to note about adding images into Illustrator designs is that it automatically creates linked images. So it'll link back to the source of the image, which is not what we want. So instead, we need to actually embed that image into the floor plan design. To do that, you go into Window and then Links, select the image, and click the menu button over here and press Embed Image. Now the image is embedded and you're good to go. Now, in order to let the Remo system know that this image is my floor plan background, I'm going to have to create a layer and name it as so. So in Illustrator, like I mentioned before, to create a layer, all you do is head over to the Layers panel on the right-hand side, and I'm going to select all the elements that I want included in the layer. So for example, for my floor plan background, it just contains this image. So I have it selected here, and then you click on the menu button, that's the 3 parallel horizontal lines in the upper right corner, and select Collect in New Layer. That'll create a brand new layer, and now I need to name this Map-Background. Now for the important parts, the actual conference area. This is the core conference area where all of your functional elements are going to be placed. Now, you can play around with the size of this area, but keep it to a 16:10 aspect ratio. And keep in mind that this area is going to be zoomed in to fit your guest's browser view, so you don't want to be making it too big or too small. Again, all this area is another rectangle or image, just like with the floor plan background. This time, I'm going to create a rectangle, and I'm going to color it Remo pink by changing the fill color as so. And again, the important part is to create a layer and name it appropriately. So again, I'm going to head over to the Layers panel, and I'm going to select all the elements that I want included in this conference area. So for right now, that's just the rectangle I've just created. I'm going to click the menu button and select Collect a New Layer. But this time, I'm going to name it Conference-Area. Remember, this needs to be a separate layer from the map background, so just check your layers panel to make sure that they are separated. Now let's move on to the finer details within your conference area. First up is the tables, the heart and soul of any Remo floor plan. So tables, or I should say table layers, can be any size, but remember they all need to fit within the core conference area space that you just created. Now I want to clarify some things first because it can get a little bit confusing. So this whole area is what we call the table or the table layer. So all these elements you're seeing, like the mattress, the seats, this physical circular table, the laptop, this is all underneath the table layer. So your guest can click anywhere here and they'll automatically move to this table. Okay, so when we say table, we don't just mean this circular part over here. We're referring to this whole area. All right, so for my first table layer, let's say I wanted to make a bar table or a bar area. So that's essentially 3 rectangles to construct the table or the bar table. So I'm going to draw or create the first rectangle by selecting the rectangle tool over here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to draw my rectangle. Now I want this table to be brown in color. So underneath the fill section in the properties tab, I'm going to select a brownish color. And now I'm going to copy and paste the rectangle so I can keep the same color. I'm going to adjust its rotation and change its size. And now I'll place it where it needs to go on the edge of that first rectangle I created. Now I'm going to copy and paste this one again. And ta-da! I've got my bar table. So now let's say I wanted to add a rug beneath this table. So I'm going to go ahead and add another rectangle. And this time, I can choose to color it any color that I want using the fill, but on Adobe Illustrator, you can also fill rectangles or shapes with pre-existing patterns. So to do that, I'm going to click in the fill section over here, and all the patterns that you've got available to you will be listed over here. You can also create your own patterns as well. But there's an issue here. You can see that the rug is actually above the bar table, which should not happen. So to fix this, all you need to do is reorder the elements. And you can do that on the Layers panel on the right-hand side. So since I want the rug to be beneath my bar table, I'm going to select the rug rectangle, which is this one over here, and I'm going to drag it below all the 3 bar table rectangles. And there you go, I've adjusted the order. Alright, so now you can choose to add any other elements, like if you wanted to add food or drink, you can do that here. You will also have to add seats into this table layer as well, but we'll go through that in a while, so just hold on to that thought for a moment. Now comes the really important part. It's naming the layer. So when you're naming tables, you need to assign them what we call a unique identifier. And that's essentially just a way to identify which table is which. Alright, so the way to name this is, again, group all the elements you want underneath the table layer. So I'm clicking the three rectangles that make up the bar table, as well as the rectangle that makes up my rug. I'm going to click the menu icon and select Collect a New Layer. And now I'm going to name it table dash whatever your table name is. So for example, if I wanted to call this table area the bar area, I would name the layer table dash bar area. Alternatively, if I wanted to call it the meeting room, I would name the layer table dash meeting room. Now remember, it is a unique identifier, meaning these layer names, they cannot be repeated. So if you wanted multiple bar areas, for example, the best idea is to label each of the table layers, table dash bar area 1, and then for the next bar area table, it would be table dash bar area 2, and so on. Alright, so now whatever other elements you want to put on the table or around the table need to be put into this table layer that you've just created. So what are some of the things that you want to be putting into table layers? Well, the physical table. So in our example, it would be this bar table over here. You also want to be putting in seats. You can put in an admin seat and the name of the table. So let's go through each of those in turn. Table names. These help your guests navigate your event space. You can name them however you want, and even if you name them here, as long as you follow these guidelines on how to set it up, like I'll show you, you'll be able to edit them in the event space as well, just like you would using a standard floor plan. So essentially the table name is just a text element. So you would click the text tool over here on the left-hand side, and you would write down the table name. So I'm calling it bar area. Now you see the text element has shown up on the layers panel over here. And all you need to do now is rename that and call it name. Now again, this name layer or this name element needs to be underneath the respective table layer. So I'm going to select the name layer and I'm going to drag it to the appropriate folder or layer. Next up is the seats. This is where your guests are going to be sitting or will be placed when they first enter the event. It can be any shape, like you can see the couch on our standard floor plan, or others have designed beach chairs. It's completely up to you. This couch over here is actually created by joining a bunch of rectangles and circles together, so it really is whatever you can put together. But bear in mind, avatars are going to be 55 by 55 pixels and will be rendered as circles, so just remember that when you're designing your seats. So since I'm creating a bar, I want to make bar stools for my seats, and that's just a simple oval. So to make that, I click on the shape tool, and this time I'm going to change it to an oval, like so. And then I'm going to draw myself an oval. And now I'm going to change the size of this to 60 by 60 pixels by selecting the oval and going into the Properties tab and adjusting the size here. I want it to be 60 by 60 so that when an avatar sits there, the whole seat is not covered and you can still see a little bit of it there. So now that I've designed it, I have to name it correctly as well. So to do that, you need to find the seat that you just created on the right-hand side in the Layers tab, and then you're going to name it Seat. Now, I like to add some more information to this name, but this part is not compulsory. The only compulsory part is that that name has to begin with seat. So I like to add the table number and the seat number as well, just to give myself some context about which table the seat belongs to, but you don't have to do that. Again, you need to make sure that the seat that you've just created is put underneath the respective table layer. So as you can see, this seat I created is for the bar table. So I need to drag this element or this layer into the bar area table layer. Another very important thing to note for seats besides the nomenclature is the number of seats you have on a floor. So one thing with Remo is that we let guests freely choose what seats or what table they want to move to, which means that there needs to be empty seats on the floor plan for them to move to. So what happens essentially is that Remo fills up to 80% of the number of seats you designed on the first floor when guests enter the space, and then it moves on to filling the second floor. If it sounds a bit confusing, let me break it down for you. For example, if you were to design 50 seats, Remo will put the first 40 guests to enter onto the first floor because 80% of 50 is 40. The next 40 guests will be placed on the second floor, and so on and so on. So it fills up to 80% of the capacity of your floor plan at a time. So always design more seats than the number of guests you want per floor. That being said, we allow a maximum of 120 seats per floor and a minimum of 25 seats, and this includes any admin seats. Speaking of which, the next element you can add in a table layer is the admin seat. So this is the extra seat that hosts can occupy if the table gets full. So usually hosts will create an invisible seat to avoid guests' confusion if they see an empty seat that they cannot occupy. But again, this is up to you. So I do want to create an invisible seat. So I'm again going to just draw an oval. I'm going to make it 55 by 55 pixels to match the size of avatars this time. And now to make it invisible, all I have to do is remove the fill and border colors. So over here in the Properties tab, you can see there's the fill and border options. So to make this invisible, I'm just going to click the fill option over here and select the no fill, which is this white box with the red line through it over here. Similarly, I'm going to do the same thing for the border option or the stroke option over here. I'd click it and then select the no stroke option, which is the white box with the red line through it. And now look, the oval is actually invisible on the floor plan. Now again, the way you name this is super important. So you need to name this layer admin-seat. You can choose to add the table name afterwards as well, so that you can easily identify which admin seat belongs to which table, but that's up to you. The really important part is that it has to have the words admin-seat at the beginning. You do need to let Remo know though which table this admin seat belongs to. And the way you do that is to again put it underneath the respective table layer as so. Alright, so now if I go ahead and expand this table layer or folder, I can see I've got the name, I've got the admin seat, and I've got the one seat that I've created, and I've got the bar table and the rug. Now you would do exactly the same thing to create all of your other tables or table layers. But you have to remember that each new table you create needs to have its very own table layer and a unique table layer name. Another thing to note is that you need to make sure each of the table layers that you are creating are actually put underneath the conference area layer that you created at the beginning of this tutorial. Now let's move on to the other parts, like the green room, formerly known as the stage. Now remember, the green room is the private meeting room or area where just hosts and registered speakers can enter. This green room can be any shape or size that you want, but the number of seats you can have will depend on which plan you're subscribed to. So let's say I wanted a circular green room or a circular stage. So I'm going to go ahead and insert an oval using the shape tool on the left-hand side, and I'm going to draw it however big or small I want it to be. So here's my stage. Now, if you want your green room or stage to actually allow hosts and speakers to enter, you're going to need to add some seats to it as well. But the process of adding seats is exactly the same as adding seats to a table layer like you just did. You can choose to make these seats visible or invisible, and you can choose the design of the seats as well, so you can add a bench or a couch or keep it simple with just circles. For my green room, I'm going to keep them as invisible circles, so the process is exactly the same. I'm just going to create another oval, and I'm going to change the size, and I'm going to make it invisible. But again, the important thing is that this layer or this element needs to be named seat. So to do that, I'm going to go into the Layers tab, I'm going to find the circle I just created, and I'm going to rename it seat. Since I want more than just one seat, and my plan does allow for it, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this oval, like so. Now I need to group all of these elements in my green room together into another layer. So that includes the oval stage that I created and the two seats. So to do that, I'm going to select all of the elements I want included. I'm going to click the menu button and select Collect in New Layer. And I'm going to name this layer Table-Stage. Now this essentially tells the system that everything in this layer or in this folder is part of that stage or green room area. Okay, let's move on to the billboards now. Now remember, in Remo you can have two billboards. The left billboard is for a YouTube, Vimeo, or Twitch video, and the right billboard is for text, commonly used for an agenda or any important announcements. Essentially, these two billboards are just two rectangles, and you can choose to add shadows like we've done on the standard template or borders, but that's up to you. You can change the size as well for these billboards. So for example, if you were trying to create a floor plan for a movie premiere, you may choose to enlarge the left video billboard so it becomes like a movie screen. Or you can even choose to leave out the billboards completely if you have no purpose for them. But they must stay as rectangles. Alright, so to create a billboard, I'm going to use the shape tool again, and I'm going to change it to a rectangle. and then I can draw my rectangle or write billboard however large or small I want it to be. Now I'm going to copy and paste this rectangle for the left billboard. But I'm going to make this larger than the right billboard because I really want to feature the video on my floor plan. Now we need to name these separate layers. So for the right billboard, in the Layers tab over here, I need to call it Table-Right-Billboard. Similarly for the left billboard, I need to call it Table-Left-Billboard. Now I want to clean this up a little bit to make it look a little bit nicer, so I'm going to go ahead and group these two billboard layers together and create a new layer and call it Screens. You'll notice once you group them or put them in the same layer, if you select that layer by clicking on the dot over here, you can move everything in that layer all together or even change their sizes together. Sponsor banners work pretty much the same way as billboards do. Again, these are just rectangles, but you guessed it, they've got to be named a certain way. The number of sponsor banners you can have per floor plan depends again on which Remo plan you have. So be sure to check your plan features before creating your designs. These do have to be rectangles as well, and the recommended size is 245 by 120 pixels. But there is some wiggle room there, so you can definitely experiment with that. Sponsor banners can actually be of different sizes, but again, they must stay as rectangles. Alright, so to actually add a sponsor banner, again, I'm going to use the rectangle shape tool. I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'm going to follow the recommended size here by adjusting it in the Properties tab. I'm also going to make the fill color invisible here in case I end up not using the sponsor banner in my event space. But I do want to create a border around it just to highlight them. And I'm going to make sure that border is a little bit thicker so that we can see it clearer. Now the important part is the naming. Go into the Layers tab, find the sponsor banner you just created or the rectangle you've just created, and name this Sponsor. So now my plan allows for more than one sponsor banner, and I do want a second one to link to another event building or distribute downloadable content. So I'm just going to copy and paste my previous one, but make it slightly smaller in width since this banner is not going to be featuring a paying sponsor. But this time, the only difference is that I'm going to name it Sponsor-2. So the Remo system knows that I've got two sponsor banners on my floor plan. If you wanted to add another sponsor banner, the way that you would name it would be Sponsor-3, then Sponsor-4, and so on and so on. If you want, you can also add a text element under this group that indicates to your guests what these booths are for and what they can do with them. To do that, you would just use the text tool and write down your text, but please note that this text cannot be changed in the event space. And guess what? You've just created all the elements of a Remo custom floor plan. How awesome! But one last thing, you need to make sure that your layers are organized. So you should have two big layers. The first one is the map background, and this contains anything on your floor plan background. And the second one is the conference area. This one will contain the floor of your conference area, so that's that initial rectangle you created at the beginning. It would include any table layers that you've added and their respective table names, seats, and admin seats. It would also include the stage or the green room layer, your billboards, and any sponsor banners that you've created. Now the last step is you need to export the file into SVG format. So in Illustrator, just click File, and then Export, and Export As. Write down the name of your floor plan and make sure you change the format to SVG over here. Once you're done, click Export. Now in Illustrator, you also need to make sure the responsive option over here is unchecked and set the after output decimal number over here to 2. Then click OK and your floor plan is exported and ready to go. Now go on to our floor plan validator to check that everything's looking good. Once you're there, press Choose File and choose your SVG file that you've just exported. Immediately, you'll see the results of the validator tool. This checks if all of the elements have been found and if there are any upfront errors. But that's not all. It's really important, even if you see the green tick marks on all parts, that you also scroll down and check the actual image, because sometimes your file may not export the way it should, or the way you've designed it may not map out to the Remo system. So by looking at the image, you can see if the placement of all of your tables and seats are where you wanted them. Make sure none of the table areas are overlapping each other. For your information, the gray area here represents a table, and you can make sure all your other elements are also where you want them. One note on file sizes is that we recommend having a file size of about 500 KB to 1 MB. From our experience, these just work best. With that being said, there is some wiggle room, but please note that the greater the file size, the slower the load time for your guests, especially if they're not on a stable internet connection. So general rule of thumb, keep it as small as you possibly can. If everything looks good to you, you can click the Need Help button over here and attach your floor plan. You can then ask one of our representatives to upload it to your account, and we'll take it from there. All right, so that is a crash course in designing a custom floor plan on Adobe Illustrator. Have fun!